Shalom everyone, and thank you for joining me in learning Parashat Chayei Sara. Today we're going to try to understand the effect that Sarah had on Abraham while she was alive, but not only while she was alive, but also after her death. Even though the name of this parsha is Chayei Sara, the life of Sarah, the Torah begins really with her death and her burial. So let's try to delve into the narrative and try to derive some interesting lessons that will reflect on Abraham and Sarah's relationships, their vision, and how important Sarah was in Abraham's life. והיו חיי שרה 100 שנה ו20 שנה ו7 שנים שני חיי שרה. And the life of Sarah were 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years, which means 127 years. ותמות שרה בקריית ארבע היא חברון בארץ כנען, and Sarah died in קריית ארבע in Hebron, in the land of Canaan. ויבוא אברהם, and Abraham came, לספוד, to eulogize לשרה, for Sarah, ולבכותה, and to cry for her. And then, we all know the story of ויקום אברהם מעל פני מתו, and Abraham stood up, וידבר על בני חת לאמור, and he spoke to the Hittites, to the nation of Chet, and asked them to do what? גר ותושב אנוכי עמכם, I'm just a stranger here. תנו לי אחוזת קבר עמכם, please, I would like to buy a burial place for my wife, ואגברה מתים מלפני, so I will be able to bury Sarah. I would like to call your attention to one specific issue that we have here in this narrative. There are many other challenges, but one for sure. It says, ויבוא אברהם, and Abraham came to eulogize for Sarah and to cry for her. And obviously when we read such a verse, we need to ask ourselves two main questions. When it says, ויבוא אברהם, and Abraham came, we need to ask, where did he come from? But you want to tell me that he was not there when Sarah died? Where was he? That's question number one. The second question is, the sequence of events are a little strange. It says that Ephron eulogized Sarah and then he cried for her, or because of her. Now, the natural behavior is that you first cry and then you write a eulogy. What does it mean that he came to eulogize her first and only after that you have livkota and he cried? So those are the two main issues. One, where did he come from? B, the sequence of events. So let's try to see and explore what the commentators has to say about it. The Midrash Tanchuma, our sages in this Midrash, says, כשמתה שרה, when Sarah died, קפצה זקנה על אברהם ונקרא זקן. After Sarah died, Abraham became an old person. Now, obviously, he was the same age. He didn't become older in terms of years. Abraham just became old in terms of losing his vitality. He was not as active as he was before anymore. He became more of a person who, to some extent, even lost interest in life and activities. שנאמר שמעוני, שמענו אדוני נשיא אלוקים אתה בתוכנו, אוי נודע בשערים בעלה מיד כשבטו עם זקני ארץ הזקין, לכך נאמר ואברהם זקן. So one thing is that he became somewhat of a person who is a little bit detached, but then at the same time, he was, in a way, he was placed as someone who is known as יושב בשערים בעלה, he's being known in the gates of the cities. As Bnei Chet told him, שמענו אדוני, נשיא אלוקים אתה בתוכנו, he became like the chancellor of his company, which is more of an honorary degree and an honorary position, being admired by everyone. But basically, after Sarah's death, Abraham, in a way, is becoming the honorary person, but not really the active CEO of the company. So that's what Midrash Tanchuma says. Nikra Zaken, so he's received the name Zaken someone who obviously gets tremendous admiration and respect, but he doesn't make too many decisions. So it seems to be from the Midrash that while Sarah was alive, Avram always was on the go. He always accomplished more and more. He didn't look for being placed as a chancellor or as the emeritus. He was an active player in history. But after Sarah's death, in a way, he had to take a step back. Philo, 1st century in Alexandria, says the following. After Abraham discovered that his lifelong mate had died, he found himself wrestling with grief, which threatened to overtake his soul. Sarah's life was so important to Abraham. She was his partner, she was his wife, she was his best friend. His sadness, his grief, basically threatened to overtake his neshama, his soul, his life. However, Abraham's inner strength, derived from his virtuous values and power of reason, because Philo looks at Abraham very similar to what the Rambam looks at Abraham in the 12th century, that Abraham is a prototype of someone who uses cognitive abilities, and his natural adversary of passion, Abraham's capacity to act rationally at all times, served to guide him in this hour of sorrow. This is a very insightful idea that Philo suggests. Abraham comes back and he gets the news. Sarah died. The sadness, the grief, the sorrow, the pain, the memories. All those years that they were together, doing so many things together, changed the world together. And now, he is alone. That sadness, that grief could overtake him. But he understood he still has a mission. His mission is to stand up and to find a burial place for Sarah. And if you look at the pasuk itself, it says, after Avram came to eulogize for Sarah and to cry for her, Vayakom Avraham me'al pnei meto. Avram stood up and he spoke to the Hittites, to the nation that are the only people who can really give him a burial site. Which means Avram was basically almost overtaken by sorrow, but he was able to what? To get up. Which is has a tremendous lesson to us. When people meet sorrow and grief, there are many ways to react to it. Some people are basically being overtaken by the sorrow and the grief and they cannot stand up anymore. It's hard for them, it's challenging. And some people find this inner strength and the understanding that it's a challenging time, but still I need to do a few things. I'm still being called to be active. And that's what Philo suggested. So we see, according to Philo, Sarah's death basically hit Avram very hard to his core, but he also understood that even without Sarah, he still needs to complete few things in order to complete his mission in life. The Midrash Tanchuma, again, try to elaborate on this pasuk, and he says the following: ואברהם זקן, and Avram was old, זה שאמר הכתוב, אשת חיל עטרת בעלה. A woman of valor, she is her husband's crown. זה אברהם שהיה מקונן על שרה. Avram would eulogize Sarah and was crying for her. מה כתיב למעלה מן העניין, ותמות שרה, התחיל אברהם לבכות עליה ולומר, אשת חיל מי ימצא, בטח בלב בעלה. If you sing the song on Friday night, אשת חיל מי ימצא, that it's from Proverbs in chapter 31, אשת חיל מי ימצא, who can find a woman of valor? According to this midrash, who said it? Abraham. It says, how can I find, after Sarah's death, how can I find such a woman of valor? בטח בלב בעלה. I trusted her completely. When? בשעה שאמר לה, אמרי נא אחותי את. When, if you remember, when Avram, that was in Parashat Lech Lecha, when Avram went down to Egypt and he told Sarah, please tell Pharaoh that you are my sister and not my wife. and he trusted her that she will be able to do it. Avram had a full trust in Sarah. גמלת אותו ולא רק כל ימי חייה, דרשה צמר ופשתים בין יצחק לישמעאל, שאמרה, גרש האמה הזאת ואת בנה. So now the Midrash explains almost every pasuk in Eshet Chayil, and it says, Sarah stood in one of the most crucial moments in Jewish history, when she demanded Abraham to expel Ishmael and to keep Yitzchak, because she understood that Yitzchak, he is the real heir of Abraham's legacy, and Ishmael cannot be part of it. She made a decision that was not popular. Abraham was not happy. God had to intervene and to tell Abraham, you need to listen to Sarah. I can just imagine the tension between Abraham and Sarah. Abraham loved Ishmael, that was his son. He had even also some affection to Hagar. And then Hashem says to him, you need to listen to Sarah, you need to get rid of Ishmael and Hagar. Because Sarah saw the vision, she saw that Yitzchak is the only heir that can continue Abraham's legacy. She took a very harsh stand, but she did it for a good reason. And now Abraham retroactively understands that she was right. So that's his woman of valor. ותקום בעוד לילה, וישכם אברהם בבוקר. When she, the woman of valor, she always wake up in the middle of the night and she's not lazy, Abraham also learned from her. He woke up early in the morning in order to walk with Yitzchak to the Akedah. זממה שדה ותיקחהו, and now this is the point of the Midrash. She zamema, she conspired to take a field. What kind of field she conspired to take, Sarah? Upon her death, Abraham bought מערת המכפלה, the field and the grave, ושם נקברה, and she was buried there, שנאמר, ואחרי כן קבר אברהם את שרה אשתו. Now this is something very interesting. Sarah's death caused Abraham to do something that he didn't do until now. Abraham came to the land of Canaan. There was a famine. He went down to Egypt. He came back with tremendous flock and wealth. But you don't see in the narrative that Abraham bought a place to dwell in or to do anything there. For example, Yaakov bought a place. But Abraham did not. Until Sarah's death. He knew that she wants that place in Hebron. He knew that that's her will and that's in a way her expectation. And because of that, he did it. So that's the first time that Abraham bought something in Eretz Israel, in the land of Israel, was this grave, this field. And that was because of Sarah. So in a way, Sarah's death caused another mission for Abraham to do. And really, when you look at Abraham's life after Sarah's death, you see that he buys the field, he buys the grave, and then he makes sure that what? That Yitzchak has a wife. And that's it. In a way, Abraham's life comes to an end. Which, when you think about it, according to this Midrash, after Sarah's death, Abraham realized that most of his achievements, it's because of this partner that he has. That he had, Sarah. And her death influenced him and impacted him in tremendous ways. But it also inspired him to do one more thing. To make sure that she is buried in the place she wanted and to buy a place in the land of Israel. And also to make sure that his legacy and her legacy, and in a way I would even suggest that his legacy is because of her legacy. It's because of her historical decision to keep Yitzchak and to expel Ishmael, that this legacy needs to be married and needs to have children and family, which means he sends Eliezer to find a wife for Yitzchak. So that's the insight into this Midrash. So the Kli Yakar has another interpretation an insight into the psukim, into the verses that we read. And he says the following. ויבוא אברהם לספוד לשרה ולבכותה. And Abraham came to eulogize for Sarah and to cry for her. מילת לשרה הכניס בין הדבקים, כי היה לו לומר לספוד ולבכותה לשרה. So first question that the Kli Yakar says, it says, look at the language in the verse. It says, ויבוא אברהם, and Abraham came to eulogize for Sarah and to cry for her. In a way, it should have been written, ויבוא אברהם, and Abraham came to eulogize and to cry for Sarah. The word for Sarah, it's like in the middle. It's not the right place. It should be at the end of the sentence. וגם כולו מיותר, כי היה לו לומר לסופדה ולבכותה. In addition, or an additional question, he says, the pasuk could have been written, ויבוא אברהם לספודה ולבכותה, to eulogize her and cry for her without the word Sarah at all, because we know that Avraham came because he heard that Sarah died. And the third question, גם בכל מקום הבכי קודם להספד, וכאן מוחלפת השיטה. And it says also, when you look at people, first they cry and then they eulogize the deceased. Not that they eulogize the deceased and then they cry. So what's going on here, says the Kli Yakar. So he suggested the following. ונראה, לפי שבכל מת, האבל הולך ומתמעט. כי ברבות הימים, הכל נשכח. He says, in a regular grief, the grief, the sadness, the mourning, is basically decreases every day with time. And then you start forgetting things and you are a little less sad. Omnam, however, צדקת זו, this righteous woman, Sarah, בכל יום ויום הרגישו ביותר בהיעדר שלה. Time did not heal, exactly the opposite. Time just magnified how much Abraham missed her, how important she was in his life, what kind of an impact she did on this world. מצד היעדר תורתה ומעשיה הטובים שנעבדו לדורה, על כן הקדים ההספד לבכי. This is really a very meaningful commentary. Avraham, what is a hesped? What is a eulogy? Eulogy, in a way, you try to characterize the deceased. You try to focus on what he or she did, what kind of impact that they had, how did they affected people and how they affected generations to come. What did they create? What did they invent? Every day that went by, Avram realized what kind of a tremendous loss, not only for him, but for everyone in this world. If Sarah would have another day, another week, she was able to accomplish so much more. And how did he know that? By first eulogizing. The eulogy, the understanding, the comprehension, the internalization of her tremendous personality and her tremendous talent that came out of the eulogy caused Avram to cry even more for Sarah. And therefore, now he has answers for all his questions. ויבוא אברהם, and Avram came לספוד לשרה, to eulogize for Sarah. It was not a eulogy for him, it was a eulogy for Sarah, understanding her, describing her, understanding her greatness. And that caused him to do what? To cry. To cry for the tremendous loss of such potential, of such greatness. That's what Abraham realized after her death. The Ktav in Kabbalah also focus on the sequence, first eulogy and then crying, and he suggests something a little different. He says, הבכי רגיל לבוא קודם ההספד, והיה ראוי לומר לבכותה ולספוד. He says it would be more appropriate to say that he first cried, and only after that he eulogized her, as we said before. אמנם, however, לפי שהבכי יורה על הצער בבחינת אפיסת אמת, וההספד הוא סיפור שבחו להרגיש הנשארים מה שאיבדו. He says, the crying is basically a reflection of the sorrow on the fact that now I need to say goodbye to that person who just died. Basically, I'm crying for what? For the fact that he left me. The eulogy is basically talking about the greatness of that person and to tell other people what they lost. Not that the grief is for what basically that the person was lost. The eulogy is for what we lost. Basically to share with the people, you know, this person died, you lost something in your life. ובצדיקים, with righteous people, אין ראוי לבכותם מצד אפיסתם. The appropriate thing is not to cry because they died. כי גדולים במיתתם יותר מבחייהם, לכן הקדים ההספד לבכי להורות כי אין הבכי עליה רק מצד הנשארים וכעניין ההספד, וזה גם כן טעם כף זעירה במילת ולבכותה. Avraham wanted to send a message, to convey a lesson to us. When you talk about a great person, you don't cry just because he died. You cry because you understand what you lost. This is totally different perspectives. When you think about great people who died, you don't cry just because they died. You cry because of the potential that they had, the future that they could shape and form, the impact that they could have on so many people. The eulogy brings you to the understanding, to the internalization, and to the realization of what you lost. And that's the hesped. And then you can cry. I think that the Ktav and the Kabbalah and the Kli Yakar are looking at the Pasuk and basically telling us, in a way, when Sarah died, Avraham also realized how essential she was for him and for his journey and destiny, and how much he's going to miss her guidance. I also will add that is also a fascinating thing that Avraham really, after Sarah's death, does not make any decisions. He buys the cave and the field because that's what she wanted. And then he sends Eliezer to find a wife for Yitzchak. And when Yitzchak gets married, we don't hear anything that Avraham is happy, not happy, nothing. There is no real conversation between Avraham and Yitzchak after that. Sarah was the engine, not just Avraham's wife. She was an essential partner, a crucial partner to Avraham, and definitely a major reason for his success. The Netziv tried to explain the story of Avraham and Sarah in the following way. ועוד יש הבדל בעניין המת ואבליו. There is another difference or distinction between the deceased and the people who mourn him or her. אם המת גורם לאבליו שינוי בהליכות עולמו וצערו מרובה יותר משבח המת עצמו, אז היה בכי קודם ועיקר להספדו. It says, if the death of that person caused the mourners to change their ways, and his sorrow or grief is greater than the praises for the deceased, so then you cry more and you eulogize less. מה שאין כן אם להפך, שאין המת גורם הריסה בהליכת עולם של אבלה ושבחו הוא מרובה, אזי הספדו עיקר וקודם לבכי. The Netziv says that everything that I said before, it might be right, but he has a different perspective. He says, in a case that when the death of that person does not totally change my perspective on life, and the praises for that deceased is greater than my sadness, so then eulogy takes precedent over crying. And basically, with Sara, according to the Netziv, Avram really didn't change anything. There were no regrets, and therefore, he was able to eulogize her without too many emotions, and then to cry for her. Mishum hachi bechurban Bet HaMikdash, so that's why he explains that at the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, of the temple, קרא הקדוש ברוך הוא לבכי על הנהגת עולמו, שעל ידי זה נשתנה סדרי עבודה, ועוד הרבה שלא כרצון הקדוש ברוך הוא כביכול, והוא מרובה על הספדו על כמה צדיקים שנהרגו בחורבן בית המקדש. משום כך הכתיב תחילה לבכי, ואחר כך למספד. So the Netziv says that when you look at the psukim that describes Hashem's reaction to the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash, it says that first God called for crying. Why? Because everything changed after the destruction of the temple. The nature changed. And only after that, for eulogy, for all the righteous people that were killed. However, here, in the case of Avram and Sarah, במיתת שרה לא גרם לאברהם שינוי בהליכות עולמו עוד, שהרי כבר נתגדל יצחק בנה שהוא התכלית, והספדה רבה על פי חשיבותה, משום הכי הקדים לספוד לה ואחר כך לבכותה. So therefore, says the Netziv, Sarah's death did not change Abraham's perception on life or behavior. He basically got to the point that he is not going to change it. And therefore, because his life is not going to change because of her death, he was able to first eulogize her, which requires a little bit more of rationalism and using your cognitive abilities and not to be affected by your emotions, and then to cry for him. And then, Rabbi David Tzvi Hoffman. Rabbi David Tzvi Hoffman, in Germany, the 20th century, says the following: מכל אמהותיה של האומה הישראלית, אין הכתוב נוקב במספר שנות החיים אלא זה של שרה אמנו בלבד. When you look at the Torah, the only mother that we know exactly how old was she when she died, it's only Sarah. We don't know about Rivka, we don't know about Rachel, Leah. Only Sarah. It says 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years. 127. והכתוב מעריך בתיאור שנות חייה עם מותה. And the Torah delineates a lengthy description of her life and her death. Why is it? I mean, Sarah obviously is a very unique woman, tremendous abilities, but still, we could continue with our lives without knowing that she was 127. What's the idea behind it? Says Rabbi David Tzvi Hoffman, משום שאליו מתקשר תיאור רכישת מערת המכפלה. He says this entire lengthy description of Sarah's life and death, it's all because it's connected to what? To the first purchase that Avraham did, which was the cave, the grave in that field. שעתידה לשמש נחלת קבר לאבות האומה. That it's going to be what? Not only the burial site for Sarah, but also for Avram, for Yitzchak and Rivka, for Yaakov and Leah. תמוה הוא הפירוט הרב שבו מוסרת לנו התורה, כיצד קונה אברהם שטח קרקע בארץ המובטחת, לפי כל כללי הקניין, בדומה, במידה מסוימת, לתיאור רכישת הבאר שבבאר שבע. Rav David Tzvi Hoffman says, it's a bit of a wonder to understand why is that the Torah have such a lengthy description of all the discussion between Avraham and the business negotiation about how much to pay, and no, take it as a gift. No, I don't want it as a gift. I want to buy it. Oh, you can take all this story and basically put it in 2 sentences. Avram said, please sell me a place. No, we can't. Please do so. Okay, 400 shekels. Okay, done deal. That's it, 2 psukim. Instead, there's all the back and forth, and at the end, Avram purchased this field, and it says, ואין להניח שכוונת התורה בזה להראות שאכן יש לישראל זכות לבעלות על ארץ כנען, הואיל והאבות רכשו בנחלות. And it's hard to say that the only purpose of describing the first purchase is only to show that we have ownership on a piece of land. There is probably something more than that. נראה יותר שסיפור זה בא לשקף את גודל אמונתם של האבות וביטחונם בהשם. He says probably this story comes to tell us about how great was the faith and the trust that Hashem, that Avram and Yitzchak and Yaakov had in God. באשר לא התייאשו מן קיום ההבטחה, אף על פי שבחייהם היוותה המציאות ניגוד גמור להבטחה זו. Think about it for a second, says Rabbi David Tzvi Hoffman. Go back to 2 weeks ago, Parashat Lech Lecha. You remember the first few verses? Hashem says to Avram, Lech Lecha, מארצך, ממולדתך, מבית אביך, אל הארץ אשר אראך. Go, leave your homeland, your birthplace, your nation, your city, and go to the land that I'll show you, and I'll make you a big nation, and I will make your name great, and I will give you the land. So Avram goes to the land of Israel, thinking what? That the land is going to be delivered to his hands. Instead, no. There is famine, he goes to Egypt. He comes back to the land of Israel, he does not buy anything. And even when his wife died, he needs to, in a way, beg. For what? To buy a land that belongs to him. Now you tell me, would you have any trust or faith in a God that told you, this land is yours and I need to beg to pay for a land that belongs to me? And the answer is, you need to have tremendous faith that you will have that land, but perhaps not now. And that's what Abraham did. This entire lengthy discussion, when Abraham could basically say, you know what? Enough with that. God, you promised me the land. I need to beg those people to buy a land? And the answer is, Abraham was able to do it. אברהם, בעליו העתיד של כל הארץ הזאת, אברהם, the owner, the rightful owner of this entire land, מי שכבר שחרר אותה במלחמת גבורה מפלישתם של כובשים זרים, מפלישתם של כובשים זרים, אינו יכול לקרוא שלו אפילו שטח קטן ומוגבל, בו יוכל לקבור את אשתו האהובה. הוא נאלץ לרכוש שטח כזה בדמים מרובים. In a way, Rabbi David Tzvi Hoffman says, this is another trial, this is another nisayon, another test to Abraham, to his faith. You would think that enough, die. Maspeak. Enough with the tests to Abraham. Now at the moment of ultimate grief, Abraham is saddened. Abraham is in tremendous grief. As Philo said, the sadness, the grief is about to overtake him. And now there is another test. He needs to beg to purchase a site to bury his wife. Can you imagine this case? Sarah is lying there and needs to be buried. He's talking to people who definitely are not his peers. They talk to him in a very nice way, and then they get Ephron, who says, no, take it as a gift, and not gift, yes, gift. And he needs to beg to give money to Ephron, and Ephron obviously take advantage of Abraham's situation and basically ask for a tremendous amount of money for a burial site for his wife. And Abraham think about it for a second and says, Rega, just a moment. This is my land. I need to pay for that? And the answer is yes. Sarah's death, in a way, pushed Abraham to the limits. That was another test. And Abraham passed this test in an incredible way. Flying colors. Abraham was able to understand that Sarah left him with yet another challenge. And this challenge will elevate him. He will be able to buy this place, to not only for himself, but to his descendants as well, to show that even if things are not going your way, and even if God's promise is not being fulfilled in your time, you don't live only for yourself. You don't live only in one dimension of time. You live as part of the past, you live the present, and you, with your actions, can shape the future. So if we go back now, and let's go back to the first narrative, Vayu Chayei Sara, and the life of Sarah were 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years. This is the life of Sarah. So when talking about the lives of Sarah, we talk about her essentiality in Abraham's life, but not only in Abraham's life, in the formation of Am Yisrael, of the people of Israel. We understand what you can accomplish as a person. And then Vatamot Sara bekriyat arba Ephron be'eretz Canaan. She died, and Abraham came. By the way, he came, according to many of our sages, he came from the Akedah. So you can imagine Abraham's drama in his life. He was about to sacrifice his son. God says no. Then he went back with his people, with Eliezer and Ishmael. We spoke about it last week. Just being able to again readjust to normal life. And then the death of his partner, of his beloved wife. And you would think that Abraham is dying. He can't do that. He eulogized her, and he understands that Sarah left him with another mission. And he cries for her. But not only for her. He cries for what this universe lost. This tremendous personality. And then what does he do? Vayakom Avraham. Avraham is able to stand up and to go to the nitty-gritty of a negotiation that should not really happen because that's his land. But he's willing to go through another test, knowing that Sarah is expecting him to do it. He purchased this place, Me'arat HaMachpelah in Hebron, where all of our ancestors, Avram and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, Yaakov and Rachel, and according to some, even Adam and Eve, that basically are buried there, and they are buried in Hebron, which means in Hebrew, chibur, a connection not only to them and connection to God, but connection to this land, a connection to faith that will never fade away despite the reality that might contradict God's promise. This is what Am Yisrael is all about. This is what Avram and Sarah imbued in the generations to come in their descendants. This is the legacy of Avram. Faith is sometimes being tested when everything contradicts what you believe. That everyone can mock you and disregard you and dismiss you. When you think that everything that you do, everything that you try is not successful, then you need to remember Sarah. Then you need to remember Avraham. Then you need to remember lispod leSarah ve'livkota. Learn from Sarah. Learn from Avraham. Their tremendous faith and bitachon. Their tremendous conviction that if God promised, it might not happen in my time, but it will happen. And when it does, I need to know that I made my share of the good decisions to prepare the next generation to enjoy God's promises. Thank you.